The sound was faint but clear. Something clanged deep in the cargo bay. Paul paused, his tools still in hand. He had been fixing a leaking coolant pipe on deck 4, and the rest of the crew was either asleep or up on the bridge. The noise didn't match the usual hums and creaks of the Emberlight, his cargo ship. It was something different, something alive. Paul wiped his hands on his shirt and climbed down the steel ladder into the lower bay. The motion sensor lights flickered on slowly, revealing rows of sealed crates stacked in neat lines. The cold of the room hit him as soon as he stepped in. They kept it near freezing to preserve supplies, but this cold felt sharper tonight. He walked slowly, listening carefully. Another soft clatter came from the far corner behind a crate of metal tools. Paul tightened his grip on the wrench he carried, just in case. As he turned the corner, he stopped in his tracks. Crouched behind the crate was a small figure, thin, trembling, and clearly not human. Her back was to him, covered in short white fur. 2 long ears drooped from her head, one twitching at the sound of his steps. She wore a torn jumpsuit that barely covered her shoulders, and she was hugging herself, shivering from the cold. Paul didn't move for a few seconds. He had seen many species in space, but never one like this. She looked almost like a girl, young, small, and frightened, but also not. Her body was shaped like a human's, but her hands had light claws, and her feet were bare with soft pads. She turned slowly to look at him, her wide eyes full of fear. Her face was soft and round, with small features and pale fur across her cheeks. Her lips moved like she wanted to speak, but no words came out. "It's all right," Paul said gently, lowering the wrench. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't respond, but didn't run either. Paul looked at her again. She was clearly freezing. Her fur wasn't thick enough to keep her warm in this cold bay. She was hugging her knees tightly, and her breath came out in shaky puffs. Without thinking twice, Paul pulled off his thick brown jacket and stepped forward slowly. "Here," he said, holding it out. "You need this more than I do." She looked at the jacket, then back at his face, cautious, confused. "It's warm," Paul added. "Just take it." She reached out, hesitated, then gently grabbed it. She wrapped it around her shoulders and closed her eyes for a moment. The relief on her face was clear. Paul sat down on a crate a few feet away. He didn't want to scare her off. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She looked at him, then down. She opened her mouth slowly and whispered a single word, "Mira." Paul nodded. "I'm Paul. I work on the ship. I'm guessing you're not part of the crew." Mira shook her head once. Her voice was quiet and rough, like she hadn't used it in days. "I hid from them." Paul raised an eyebrow. "Them?" She didn't answer. She just pulled the jacket tighter and lowered her head. He could see she was exhausted. Her body trembled less now, but she still looked ready to run. Paul stood up. "Wait here," he said, and walked off. He returned a few minutes later with a protein bar and a flask of water. He placed both on the floor and slid them toward her. "Eat, drink. You're safe for now." Mira stared at the items, then looked at Paul again. Slowly, she picked up the bar and took a small bite. She chewed carefully, like someone who had gone a long time without proper food. She sipped the water slowly too, careful not to spill a drop. Paul watched her closely. He knew he should report this. The captain had strict rules. Any stowaway, alien or not, had to be registered immediately. But something about this girl made him hesitate. She was alone, frightened, hiding, and whatever she was running from, it had clearly left her scared enough to sneak onto a cargo freighter. "Don't worry," Paul said. "I won't tell anyone. But you can't stay out here. It's too cold." Mira looked up, her ears twitching slightly. Paul pointed toward one of the old maintenance lockers nearby. "There's a storage room no one uses anymore. It's warm and quiet. I'll show you." She didn't move at first, but then, slowly, she stood up. She was shorter than he thought, maybe a little over 5 feet. The jacket looked big on her, but it was already helping. Her steps were cautious, light. On her feet. Paul led her to the storage room and opened the door. Inside were unused wires, blankets, and some tools. He grabbed a few blankets and made a small bed in the corner. "This will do for now," he said. "I'll bring you food when I can." Mira looked around, then back at him. She gave a small nod of thanks. As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "Thank you, Paul." Her voice was still quiet, but steady. He smiled. "Get some rest," he said, closing the door gently behind him. Back in the hallway, Paul leaned against the wall and sighed. This was going to be trouble if anyone found out. But something in his chest told him he did the right thing. Whatever Mira was hiding from, he had just made a silent promise to protect her. And now, he couldn't go back. Paul moved through the ship's narrow hallway with a bag of food in one hand and a blanket in the other. The morning shift hadn't started yet, which gave him a short window to visit Mira. The crew didn't come down to the maintenance section unless something was broken, and Paul knew how to keep it that way. When he opened the door to the small storage room, he found Mira sitting in the corner, still wearing his jacket. Her ears twitched as he stepped inside, but she didn't look afraid anymore. She sat with her legs crossed, quietly waiting. "I brought you something to eat," Paul said, placing the bag near her and another blanket. "The ship gets colder. When we enter shadow zones," Mira nodded, her eyes focused on the food. She pulled out a small packet of dried fruit and slowly chewed, making sure nothing went to waste. Paul sat on an old crate nearby. "I figured you'd be hungry. I didn't see you eat much last night." She looked up at him. "I didn't want to take too much. I don't want to be a problem." "You're not," Paul replied. "I just want to help." Silence filled the room for a few seconds. Then Mira finally spoke again. "I used to live on a research station. Not human. It belonged to the Drelek." Paul's face grew serious. The Drelek were known in deep space for their scientific work, but not always the ethical kind. Stories floated around about secret labs, genetic trials, and alien experiments. The Alliance had no proof, but many believed the rumors. "They took others like me," she said. "My kind, not many left. We don't have ships. We don't fight. We just lived. But the Drelek came, and they wanted to learn how we survived certain conditions, so they brought us in." Paul leaned forward. "And you escaped?" Mira nodded. "I was lucky. One of their ships docked with a supply freighter. I crawled inside a crate. When I woke up, I was in this ship. I stayed hidden." Paul thought about it. The Emberlay had stopped at a mixed zone supply station 2 weeks ago. It was possible Mira slipped on board during that transfer. No one would have noticed a small crate among hundreds. "They'll be looking for me," Mira said quietly. "The Drelek don't like losing test subjects." Paul's fist tightened. He hated the sound of that. "Well, they're not going to find you here. Not if I can help it." Mira gave a small smile. It was the first time Paul had seen something close to peace on her face. He stood up and checked the ceiling vent. "This room is clean. No scanners. But it won't stay safe forever. The captain sometimes does a full sweep when we land. We'll need a better hiding place before that." Mira's ears perked up slightly. "I can help. I understand machines. I watch them fix systems at the station. I can learn." Paul looked surprised. "You know tech. I watch every day." I was quiet. I listened. "I remember everything." He raised an eyebrow. "All right, come with me. Let's see what you can do." They moved to an old generator bay that Paul used for personal projects. It was dusty and filled with spare parts. Mira looked around with wide eyes, taking in every wire, switch, and tool. Paul handed her a small tool and pointed to a broken panel. "This sensor reads pressure levels. It's been giving errors for weeks. Think you can figure it out?" Mira crouched beside it and opened the panel. Her hands moved quickly but carefully. She touched the right wires, tightened the loose connections, and closed it up. The display turned green. Paul stared. "That's impressive." She smiled. "Again, I watched one of the Drelek engineers do that same repair. He didn't know I saw." Paul chuckled. "Well, I'm glad you did." They worked for another hour. Mira fixed 3 more minor systems while Paul kept watch. She moved with care and attention, her ears turning slightly every time a distant sound echoed through the ship. Later, as they sat beside the humming power coils, Paul handed her a bottle of water. "You really are something," he said. "I just want to help," Mira replied. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not. You're probably the best assistant I've ever had." She looked down at the floor. "No one ever said that before." Paul stood up and stretched. "Well, get used to it. You're good at this, and we're going to need your help soon. This ship's always falling apart." Mira gave a short laugh. It was soft, but it made Paul smile. Before they returned to the storage room, Paul gave her a small communication band. "It's not connected to the main network," he explained, "but it'll let you call me if you're in danger. Just press the green side twice." Mira slipped it on her wrist and nodded. "Thank you." Back in the hallway, Paul paused outside the door. "I'll check on you tomorrow. Get some rest." Mira looked at him one last time. "Paul," he turned, "I'm glad I found your ship." Paul didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded and closed the door behind her. As he walked back to his cabin, he felt a strange new weight in his chest. He had only meant to help someone in need, but now he felt responsible for her safety, for her future. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Mira wasn't just a stowaway anymore. She was part of his life now. The ship's alarm blared twice and then stopped. Paul looked up from his workstation. That sound only meant one thing: systems scanned every few months. Captain Freya ordered a full sweep of the Emberlight. It was part of the ship's standard safety procedure. It also meant every deck, room, and bay would be checked for leaks, heat loss, missing tools, or unexpected life signs. Paul felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Mira. She was still in the hidden storage room, the one tucked behind old crates and broken machines. It had no scanners, but if anyone got curious and opened that door, they would find her. Paul stood up quickly and left the workshop, walking fast but not enough to draw attention. As he entered the hallway, he almost bumped into Officer Denton. Denton raised one brow. "In a hurry?" "Paul, coolant line's acting up again." Paul answered, trying to fix it before the scan team reaches Deck 3. Denton's eyes narrowed. "Right. I've noticed you've been keeping to yourself lately. No reports, no updates." "That's not like you. I've been busy." Denton didn't move. He crossed his arms. "You better not be hiding anything down there. The captain won't like it." Paul forced a calm look. "You're welcome to check the coolant line yourself." Denton gave a thin smile. "Maybe. I will." Paul walked past him without another word. His steps quickened as he reached the hidden storage room. He tapped the side panel with a small tool. The door slid open silently. Inside, Mira was sitting cross-legged, working with a small circuit board. She looked up when Paul entered. "We have a problem," Paul said. "Ship scan. They're doing a full sweep." Mira stood quickly. "Will they come here?" "Maybe not, but we can't take the risk." Mira's ears twitched nervously. She grabbed the communication band on her wrist. "What should I do?" Paul thought for a second. "Come with me. I know a better place." He led her through a side corridor, one not used often. At the far end was a locked hatch that opened into the ventilation control hub. It was loud, filled with humming machines and warm air. The noise would mask any sound. Paul had rewired the scanner in this room months ago so it wouldn't report temperature changes. "You'll be safe here," Paul said. "It's loud, but warm. No one checks this room." Mira stepped inside and nodded. "Thank you." Paul left her there and returned to his post just as the scan team entered the hallway. Two crew members walked past him, carrying handheld scanners. "All clear on Deck 4. One of them said. "No signs of anything strange." Paul kept his face calm, but inside, he was still tense. That night, he met Mira again in the control hub. She was curled up against the warm pipe, the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. "I heard the scan team," she said. "I stayed quiet." "You did good," Paul replied. He sat beside her and handed her a small metal canister. "What's this?" she asked. "Tea." "Well, ship-made tea. It's not great, but it's warm." She took a sip and smiled. "It's nice." Paul leaned back against the wall. "We need a plan. You can't keep hiding in corners forever. If the captain finds you, There's nothing I can do. Mira lowered her cup. The Drellic may already know I'm here. Paul turned to her. Why do you think that? I found something strange today, Mira said. In the circuit board I was fixing. A signal code. It's not human tech. It was hidden inside. Paul sat up straight. Are you sure? Yes, she said. It's the same type the Drellic used on the station. They may have left a tracker in one of the crates I escaped with. Paul stood. We need to find it. The next morning, while most of the crew gathered for a maintenance briefing, Paul and Mira entered the cargo bay. Mira pointed to 3 crates in the back. I came in one of those, she said. Paul opened them one by one. In the third, he found a small black device attached to the inner wall. It was flat and blinking slowly. Mira stepped back. That's it. Paul pulled it out carefully and placed it in a lead-line to a box. We'll dump this at the next scrap zone. That should break the signal. Mira watched him. They'll send someone. Paul nodded. Probably. We need to be ready. Later that day, a new ship entered radar range. The Drellic. Captain Freya called it a simple border patrol. Nothing serious. But Paul knew better. That night, Mira sat on the edge of the vent control room, looking out through a small port window. They won't stop, she said. Paul stood beside her. Then we don't stop either. We fight smart. Mira turned toward him. Why are you helping me, Paul? He looked out the window. Because when I found you, you were alone, scared, and freezing. I couldn't walk away. And now you're not just a stowaway anymore. You're part of this ship, and I protect what's mine. Mira smiled gently. Then I'll protect you too. Paul nodded. Deal. Outside, the stars moved slowly past as the ship continued through the black sea of space. But inside, 2 unlikely souls were no longer strangers. They were now allies. The next morning, the bridge lights dimmed as a message came through the main console. Captain Freya stepped forward and read the signal. Paul stood nearby, pretending to check a wall panel, but listening closely. Unknown vessel requesting communication, the navigator said. Put them on screen, the captain replied. A clear image appeared. A tall alien with gray skin and sharp eyes stared into the camera. His voice was smooth, almost a calm. I am Commander Vale of the Drellic Research Fleet. One of our samples has escaped. We believe it boarded your ship 2 cycles ago during transfer at Station 9. We ask permission to scan your ship for recovery purposes. Freya crossed her arms. Do you have proof? The alien gave a small smile. We have a tracker that sent a signal from one of your cargo crates. Paul kept his face still, but his hands felt cold. The tracker Mira had discovered must have been active longer than he thought. Captain Freya frowned. We follow Alliance law here. You'll get permission for a limited scan, under my terms. No boarding without approval. Commander Vale bowed. Slightly. Agreed. We will wait outside your range and begin our remote scan. The screen turned off. Paul left the bridge quickly and headed to the lower decks. He rushed down the metal stairs and entered the warm control room where Mira waited. She was already standing, alert and tense. I heard them, she said. They're here. Paul nodded. They're scanning the ship now. We removed the tracker, but we need to be extra careful. If they detect your body heat, we're finished. Mira bit her lip. They'll look for energy signatures, not just heat. I used tools yesterday. I may have left traces. Paul thought fast. Come on, we're moving you. They passed through maintenance tunnels and down into the emergency waste control bay. The section hadn't worked properly in years, so it was sealed off. Paul had used it once as a tool dump. The scanner signals would bounce off the metal walls. He set down a thermal blanket and placed a few broken panels around to block any energy. Reflection. Stay here, he said, and keep your communication band close. Mira sat down and wrapped herself in the blanket. What will you do? I'll slow them down. If they start boarding, I'll cause delays. Mira looked into his eyes. Be careful. Paul gave her a short nod and closed the hatch behind him. Back on the main deck, the Drellic scan ship began its sweep. A deep hum echoed through the corridors as sensors passed over every part of the Emberlight. Lights flickered, doors reset. Machines paused for half a second. Paul walked casually into the power relay room and opened a panel. He carefully adjusted the wire connections and inserted a delay chip. It would confuse the scan results, causing them to bounce false readings for the next 10 minutes. The trick worked. On the bridge, Freya read the incoming signals with frustration. Too much static. She muttered, either their system is faulty or ours is getting interference. Paul kept his back turned, pretending to check fuses. Suddenly, Denton walked into the room. "What are you doing here?" he asked, fixing a relay delay. Paul answered calmly. Denton narrowed his eyes. "You're always down here when something strange happens. You've been acting secretive for days." Paul looked up slowly. "If you have something to say, say it." "I think you're hiding something," Denton said, "and I'm going to find out what." He turned and walked away. Paul exhaled slowly. Denton's suspicion was growing. That could be dangerous. He returned to Mira an hour later. She was still wrapped in the blanket, ears low. "They haven't found anything," he told her. "But Denton is getting close." Mira looked up. "Maybe I should leave before someone else gets hurt." Paul shook his head. "No, they can't take you back. Whatever they were doing to you, it wasn't right." Mira stayed quiet. Then she said, "They tried to change me, not just study. They gave me shots, tested reactions. I got sick. They call me Project Sample 4. Paul's jaw clenched. "You're not a project. You're a person." Her voice was soft. "I didn't feel like one. Until now." Paul reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not going back to them. I promise." Suddenly, the lights blinked. Red. An alarm sounded through the hall. "Unauthorized boarding detected," the computer voice called. Paul stood. They're not waiting for permission anymore. He grabbed a nearby tool belt and handed Mira a stun torch. "If anyone comes near, you who's not me, use this." "What will you do?" she asked. "I'll stop them." Paul ran toward the central loading bay. As he arrived, the Drellic soldiers stepped through a force field door. Their armor was smooth and white, and they moved with mechanical calm. Paul didn't hesitate. He pulled a control lever and released a pressure valve above them. Hot steam blasted down, causing the aliens to back away. In that second, Paul pulled the emergency shield switch, locking the bay door. Captain Frey arrived a moment later with 2 security officers. "What are you doing?" she yelled. "Buying us time," Paul answered. "They're not guests. They're hunters." The captain stared at him. "You know something." Paul took a deep breath. "There's someone on this ship. She escaped the Drellic. They were experimenting on her. She's not a threat. She just wants freedom." Freya didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "Where is she?" Paul shook his head. "If I tell you, they'll take her. She'll be gone forever." Freya sighed. "You've put us in a difficult spot." "I know," Paul replied, "but this is the right thing." The captain looked at the sealed bay door and then back at Paul. "You've got one chance," she said. "Find a way to remove her from the ship without alerting the Drellic. If they catch her here again, I won't be able to stop them." Paul nodded. "I'll find a way." As the Drellic ship waited outside and tension filled every corner of the Emberlight, Paul returned to Mira. "We have a window," he said, "but it's small. We need to move soon." Mira stood, gripping the stun torch. "Then let's not waste it." Together, they began preparing for what came next. The engines hummed softly through the walls as Paul and Mira moved quietly down the narrow maintenance corridor. The lights above flickered now and then, but Paul didn't stop. Mira walked beside him, holding his old jacket tightly around her. Small frame. Her ears were low, alert, but she said nothing. "We're close," Paul whispered. "There's a place behind the fuel bay where the scanners don't reach. The crew doesn't go there unless there's an emergency." Mira nodded, following his lead. Her steps were light, almost silent. She had learned to move like a shadow through the ship. Paul reached a panel at the end of the hallway and opened it with a small tool. Behind it was a ladder leading down into a hidden compartment, full of empty fuel containers and old storage bins. He climbed down first and then helped Mira. "This is where I used to hide from work," he said, trying to keep the mood light. Mira gave a small smile. "You didn't like work. I like machines, Paul said, but sometimes I needed a break. I didn't think I'd be using it to hide someone else. Mira sat on a container and looked up at him. I used to hide too, back on my world, before they came. Paul sat beside her. What was your home like? Mira looked distant for a moment. It was quiet. We lived near trees that glowed in the dark. My people didn't have ships or weapons. We didn't think we needed them. We trusted others. That's why the Drellic took us so easily. Paul felt a tightness in his chest. I'm sorry, Mira. She glanced at him. It's not your fault. You helped me. You gave me your jacket. No one ever gave me anything before without wanting something. Paul looked away. I didn't do it to get anything. I did it because you were cold. It was the right thing. Mira's eyes softened. That's why I trust you. They sat in silence for a while. The hum of the engines was the only sound around them. Mira leaned against the wall, looking tired but calm. Paul handed her a small ration bar and some water as she ate. He checked the portable scanner he had brought with him. The Drellic ship was still outside the Emberlight. It hadn't moved in hours. They're waiting, he said. For what? Mira asked. For us to make a mistake. Paul knew time was running out. The captain had given him a chance, but it wouldn't last. He had to find a way to get Mira off the ship safely. But where could she go? The next docking station was still 2 days away, and it was controlled by the same alliance the Drellic worked under. If she showed her face there, someone would recognize her. Suddenly, Mira spoke. I can help with repairs. Maybe if I'm useful, the captain will let me stay. Paul shook his head. It's not about that. It's about laws and rules. They don't see you as a person. They see you as property of the Drellic. I'm not property. Mira said firmly. I know that, Paul replied. But they don't care. That's the problem. Mira looked down. Then what do we do? Paul thought for a moment. We need someone who can protect you. Someone with power. Someone the Drellic can't touch. Mira's ears twitched. Like who? Paul stood up. There's someone I served with a few years ago. Her name is Riley. She's part of the Earth Patrol fleet now. If we can reach her, she can help. Where is she? Station 12. Still far, but reachable by a private beacon. The Emberlight has an old signal array in the back comms deck. If I can connect to it without alerting the bridge, I might be able to contact her. Mira stood too. I'll go with you. It's dangerous, Paul said. So is hiding forever, she answered. Paul smiled. All right then. They climbed back up the ladder and moved through the ship's lower levels, keeping to shadows and unused corridors. When they reached the comms deck, Paul opened the service hatch and crawled inside. Mira followed. The space was tight and dusty, filled with tangled wires and old panels. Paul found the signal core and began working fast. Mira handed him tools, her hands steady. After a few minutes, the screen lit up. The signal connected. This is Paul Granger aboard the Emberlight, he said into the mic, requesting private contact with Commander Riley of the Earth Patrol Fleet. Urgent matter. Please respond. They waited in silence. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, a voice came through. Paul? Is that really you? Paul smiled with relief. Riley, I need your help. Badly. What's going on? I have someone with me, a survivor. The Drellic want her back. She's not safe here. I need protection for her. Riley's voice grew serious. Is she with you now? Yes. Mira leaned closer to the mic. My name is Mira. I don't want to go back. Please help. There was a pause. Then Riley said, Understood. I'll send coordinates for a secure pickup point. I'll be there in 3 days. Keep her hidden until then. Paul disconnected the signal and turned to Mira. We have a chance now. She smiled softly. Thank you, Paul. He looked at her and nodded. We're not out of danger yet, but we're not alone anymore. They left the comms deck and returned to the hiding place. Mira curled up on a blanket while Paul kept watch near the hatch. That night, neither of them said much, but the silence between them was warm, the kind of silence that grows between people who trust each other. Paul knew the next few days would be hard, but for the first time since he found her in the cold cargo bay, he believed they had hope. The next morning on the Emberlight began with tension in the air. The Drelleck ship still hovered outside, unmoving but always watching. Paul paced in the narrow hiding space, while Mira sat on a folded blanket, hugging his jacket tightly. 3 more days, Paul said, checking the time on his wrist device. We just need to stay hidden until then. Mira nodded, but her eyes stayed on the hatch. Her ears twitched every few seconds, alert to every sound. Paul had barely slept. He kept thinking about the crew, the patrols, and the Drelleck. Sooner or later, someone might notice Mira's presence. And if they did, there would be questions he couldn't answer. I'll sneak up to the engineering bay, he said. I need to check if the power grid is stable. If anything shuts down, they'll start searching rooms. I'll come with you, Mira offered. Paul looked at her gently. Too risky. If they see you, I'll stay behind something, she said. I can help you. I don't want to hide forever. Paul hesitated, then nodded. All right, but follow my lead. They moved quietly through the lower levels, avoiding cameras and side doors. The hallways were busier than usual. Crew members whispered to each other about the Drelleck ship. Some were nervous, some were angry. No one liked being watched. At the engineering bay, Paul entered through a service hatch while Mira waited behind a stack of crates. Inside, Paul checked the power levels. Everything was normal for now, but he saw something that made his heart sink. The crew officers stood near the console, looking at a data pad. There's a missing heat signature in the cargo bay, one of them said. Could be a faulty scanner or someone hiding. The other replied, we should inform the captain. Paul quietly backed out of the hatch and returned to Mira. We need to move, he whispered. They found something near where I first found you. If they search again, they might go deeper. Mira followed without question. They moved to the air filtration room, a place no one visited unless systems failed. Inside, the room hummed with a soft sound as clean air passed through giant filters. It was warm, and the noise helped cover their footsteps. I used to come here as a kid, Paul said, back when my father worked on cargo ships. He said the air here was the cleanest on the whole vessel. Mira smiled faintly. It smells like plants. Paul looked at her. That's probably why I liked it. Reminded me of home. They sat for a while. Mira leaned back and looked up at the moving fans above. Paul took a small snack pack from his belt and handed it to her. She ate quietly, then said, Do you think Riley will really come? She always keeps her word, Paul said, even during the war. She's tough, but she's fair. Mira relaxed a little. I want to believe that. I don't want to run forever. You won't, Paul said. You're stronger than you think. You've made it this far. Suddenly, a loud alarm rang through the ship. The lights turned red. A voice echoed through the speakers. Attention crew. All personnel to stations. We have an intruder alert. Security teams sweep all decks immediately. Paul's heart jumped. They're scanning for life signs, he said. We have to keep moving. He grabbed Mira's hand, and they ran through the service tunnels. They ducked under pipes and crawled through maintenance holes. The sound of boots echoed through the corridors above. Mira's breathing grew heavier, but she didn't slow down. Her ears were raised, alert to every sound. They reached a forgotten section near the water tanks. Paul opened a hidden hatch and pulled Mira inside. Stay here, he said. No one checks this place. I need to go back to engineering and make sure the sensors can't find you. Mira looked at him with worried eyes. What if they catch you? They won't, Paul said with a small smile. I know this ship better than anyone. Mira held his hand for a second before letting go. Be careful. Paul nodded and left quickly. As he made his way back, he ran into two security officers. Near the comms deck, Granger, one of them called. Where have you been? Fixing a pressure valve. Paul replied, keeping his voice calm. Did the system go down again? Maybe, the officer said. We're looking for something or someone, but heat signature was spotted near cargo level. Paul frowned. Rats again, maybe. But we're sweeping every floor. Let me know if you need help rerouting the sensors, Paul offered. The officer nodded and walked away. Paul moved quickly to a side panel and connected his tools. He typed in a command to overload the life sign detector grid for the lower Levels. The screen blinked once, then twice. Finally, the heat signature logs vanished. Paul breathed out slowly. It would buy them time. Not much, but enough. He returned to Mira's hiding place. She looked up as he opened the hatch. "You're safe," he said. For now. Mira's shoulders relaxed. She gave a small nod. But just as they both sat down, they heard a sharp clang from above. Someone had opened the water tank room door. Voices approached. Paul stood and motioned Mira to stay silent. He crept up to the hatch opening and peeked out. The crewmen were inside, checking the water lines. One of them walked dangerously close to the hidden panel. Paul tensed. If they found it, if they even leaned on it too hard, it could open. The second crewman called out, "All clear here." The first one turned and followed him out. The door shut behind them. Paul sank back down and looked at Mira. That was close. Too close, she whispered. They both knew it couldn't go on like this. They needed Riley. And they needed her fast. Paul checked his device again. 2 days, he said. Just 2 more. Mira nodded. I'll be ready. And this time, her voice didn't shake. 2 days later, the Ember Light floated above a quiet moon. The Drellic ship still followed, but it had not made contact in hours. Inside the Ember Light, tension filled every hallway. Security teams were still checking areas. The captain had ordered more frequent scans. Some crew members whispered that the Drellic were losing patience. Paul sat in the hidden compartment near the water tanks. Mira was beside him, quiet but alert. Her ears twitched at every sound, and her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Riley will be here today, Paul said softly. Mira looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but hopeful. You trust her completely, Paul nodded. She doesn't break promises. If she said she'd help, she will. Mira gave a small nod, then leaned her head against the wall. They waited for a signal, the one Paul had told her to listen for. A short, 3-pulse vibration on his communicator. Hours passed. Footsteps came and went. Alarms buzzed once, then stopped. Paul didn't leave her side. Not this time. If something went wrong, he wanted to be with her. Then the vibration came. 3 short pulses. Paul quickly stood and showed her the device. That's her. Riley's here. Mira stood up. Her ears perked. What do we do? Follow me, quickly, and stay low. They moved through the lower service tunnels, careful to avoid the main corridors. Paul knew every maintenance shaft, every loose panel. He led her to the small supply exit hatch on the far end of the cargo bay. This hatch was rarely used. Most people didn't even remember it existed. Paul opened it and peered outside. A small shuttle hovered in the distance, just outside the Ember Light scanner range. Its lights blinked 3 times Riley's signal. He turned to Mira. This is it. You get in that shuttle, and Riley takes you to her base. You'll be safe there. Mira's ears lowered slightly. What about you? Paul looked away for a moment. I can't go with you. If I disappear now, they'll know I helped you. It'll put Riley in danger too. Mira stepped closer. But what if they find you after? I'll handle it, Paul said with a small smile. Besides, I don't want them chasing you. I'll make sure they think you escaped on your own. Mira didn't move. She looked out at the shuttle, then back at Paul. You saved me, gave me your jacket, gave me food, risked everything, and now you're staying behind. Paul nodded slowly. It was the right thing to do. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mira stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Thank you, Paul, she whispered. He held her gently. Stay safe, live free. Mira gave him one last look before slipping out of the hatch. She ran low and quick across the metal surface of the ship. The shuttle opened, and Riley pulled her inside. The door shut behind her. Paul watched as the shuttle turned and vanished into the distance. Then he closed the hatch and made his way back toward the main deck. He fixed his uniform, wiped the dust from his hands, and walked directly into the engineering bay. The captain and 3 security officers were already there. Granger, the captain said. We've been trying to reach you. Sorry, sir, Paul said calmly. Had to inspect a broken coolant pipe in Sector 12. The captain narrowed his eyes. We received an alert. A small shuttle just left the outer edge of our sensor. Range, it was unregistered. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Paul didn't answer immediately. He walked to a control panel and pressed a few buttons. I noticed strange readings earlier. He said, maybe someone accessed an old exit hatch. If that shuttle got close enough, it might have used our blind spot. The captain stared at him. Are you saying someone got on this ship and escaped without you seeing it happen? Paul kept his voice steady. That's what the data suggests. Could have been a stowaway hiding in the lower decks. We never scanned the full water tank area. The security chief stepped forward. We should double-check your logs. Paul nodded. Of course. I'll share everything for the next hour. Paul showed fake logs, blank sections, and shifted scanner data. It was risky, but he had prepared for this moment. Every answer he gave was simple, short, and believable. Finally, the captain turned away. We'll report it as an unknown intruder. The Drellic will keep watching, but they have no proof we help anyone. Paul nodded. Understood. When the room cleared, Paul sat down at the console and let out a deep breath. Later that evening, alone in his quarters, Paul looked out at the stars. He held a small item in his hand, Mira's communicator crystal. She had left it behind on purpose. A silent message. He smiled. 2 days later, he received a short, encrypted message on his private console. It was from Riley. She made it safe. She wants you to know she's learning human words. Her favorite one is hope. Paul leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The stars outside kept glowing. The Emberlight continued its journey through space. But somewhere out there, Mira was free, and that was enough for now.